I have gas, the gear acquisition syndrome. Always loved gadgets, so I've always acquired gadgets, different time, different type of gadgets. For the past 3 years, I've been acquiring a lot of camera and filming gear. One of the first professional cameras that I've acquired or bought with my own coin is the G9 Mark I. When I say professional camera, it means it is actually having dual card slot, full-fledged HDMI. It can shoot 4K 60 frames per second. It can shoot 10-bit and it can shoot 422. That was my first one, and I really loved it. Then, after shooting close to more than 2000 plus photos and some lovely trips, I figured out, I have issues with its autofocus. When you do autofocus by depth by focus, it's not going to be as good as your phase difference autofocus PDAF. That's why I actually switched to Sony. Never looked back. I really loved it. But then by the time I switched to Sony, I already had like a group of micro four third lens that I've actually accumulated. Yeah, because I have gas. So I have a 12 to 60 from Lumix. I have a 14 to 150 from Olympus. I have a 25 millimeter from Lumix. I have a 9 millimeter Leica from Lumix, and I have a 100 to 300 millimeter from Lumix. Because these lenses cover almost all the focal lengths that I try to shoot, having a micro four thirds which is having a decent to good autofocus really makes a lot of difference for me. So I pulled the trigger, gone ahead and bought myself a G9 Mark II. The G9 Mark II came in this packaging. This is my unboxing. Honestly, I've actually already unboxed it, put the battery in and charged it because the battery does not come with charging. So I thought that, okay, if that's the case, let me just have a charged battery in the camera to show you all how it actually looks like when you power it on and stuff. There were a lot of digital content creators on the internet. Some of them love the G9 Mark II. Some of them don't like the G9 Mark II. I will share with you my personal experience and my thought process actually around it, and leave it up to you to decide whether you want to consider a G9 Mark II or not. I would personally, if I did not buy any of these cameras, if I did not have any of these lenses, having known what I know now after spending so much amount of my own personal money, I would have just gone for a Sony system just because of their autofocus. But then, if I'm a digital content creator who's trying to perfect their passion towards photography and videography, and then at some point of time would like to create their own studio or their own video production business, then a G9 Mark II makes a lot of sense from that standpoint of view. So let's jump in and see what do we get with the packaging of the G9 Mark II and savor in the beautiful G9 Mark II. This is the box itself, and if you just open up the box, obviously you will be treated with a lot of paper here. I've just put that inside because me being me, I don't read much of these starting guides. I would normally prefer to download an online manual to my phone and just read it. The G9 Mark actually comes in a paper bag like this. Obviously, have some paper instructions of how to start and all of that, and guessing some kind of a guide here. Then you do get a USB-C cable because you can actually charge the camera itself by using its USB-C port. Then you basically get a Lumix strap. I wonder if this Lumix strap that they've actually sent with the G9 Mark II, does it have a G9 branding it or not? No. It's just a simple Lumix branded camera strap. That's it. Nothing fancy about it. There is no G9 specific branding on it. If I'm not wrong, I'll go back and check my G9 Mark I's camera band, and that should actually have G9 written on it. I really like it when manufacturers try to customize the band for the particular product that we're actually purchasing. It gives that exclusivity, feel. This is just charging brick which is there for the USB-A connection, and you would use this cable and connect it directly to the camera's USB-C port for charging. As a best practice, I would always go ahead on Amazon and try to order a couple of extra batteries along with a external battery charger. I don't like putting a USB-C cable to a camera and actually charge. I might do it for the first 3 or 4 cycles because I don't have the spare batteries. Else, I'm not a big favorite of actually putting USB charging directly into the camera and leaving it overnight. I don't mind using a USB hard disk for it, but yeah, nah. Cameras, no, I mean, not in that way. So that's it. That's basically the packaging of the G9 Mark II. Nothing fancier. It's a very simple packaging, which makes sense, I mean, if you ask me for any camera, the camera has to be more fancier than the packaging. I mean, let me rephrase it. The functionality of the camera has to be more fancier than the packaging itself. This is the G9 Mark II in all its glory. So the base body of the G9 Mark II is the S52 or S52X, and they've gone ahead and fitted this beautiful 25 megapixel micro four thirds sensor actually inside it. Now, I'm not sure if the sensor is going to move if I do in this way, but because of its excellent 5-axis stabilization, you can always see that sensor slightly moving in. The sensor is too small for the body, and the stabilization always kicks in to compensate for any kind of hand motion. As we are in the front side of the G9 Mark II, let me just show you, what is actually up here. This is the lens release button, which operates the pin to actually lock in the lens and out. The sensor itself. All these bottom pins are actually the electronic pins that are used to communicate with the lenses, whether it's an OIS lens, that is optical image stabilized lens, or whether that's just a regular lens. The red dot, it's more actually for alignment. You do have two customizable buttons in the front. You see from the top down, you would basically have two main dials. The left one is basically a drive dial. So this left one would drive in your single shot, your high speed shot 1, high speed shot 2. So you have this handheld high resolution photo that you can take. That's basically where this camera would sensor shift and take a much more higher resolution. I think close to 100 megapixels of high resolution image in this mode. Then obviously you actually have the time lapse mode, and you have the time delay mode. That means you have a timer. After 2 seconds, 5 seconds, or 10 seconds, you can just take a picture on it. So that's up here, the clearly marked indicators of where your dial is. I really love this red thing that is actually put in there, because that carries from the red small dial which is there on my G9 Mark I. So coming to the right hand side, so this is your mode dial. As usual, you basically have your intelligent auto mode, then you have your PAS, aperture, shutter speed, manual. Then you have this movie mode. That's where you get most of your recording options for video. Then you have this SNQ mode, and then you have three configurations, but C1, C2 are normal configurations. In C3, in soft, you can select another three more configurations below it. So C1, C2 are as is, you put in C1 or C2, whatever configuration is there, and that comes up. But whenever you select C3, the camera would actually prompt you for another three more options there, soft options, C3.1, C3.2, C3.3, and you can customize all three of them. So normally I would actually have it in movie mode, and I would go for C1 and C2 as my movie configurations. My C3 is my custom configurations when it comes to photography. But when it comes to photography, you basically have P, you basically have the A, and you have the S. So P is program mode, you have the aperture mode, you have the shutter speed mode, and you have the manual mode. So I don't think I really need a customized mode for photography, but let's see, if I actually really need one. The cool thing about the G9 Mark II is they got rid of this jingly danglies, so there are no more jingly danglies here. If you can see, this is just a straightforward piece of metal infused into the body itself, and it's there actually on both the sides. I actually have one of my Peak Design quick holders put onto it, so I can just use my in a handheld robe and just click onto it. The on and off button is just below the mode one. So this is basically on, and then it would actually on, and then you have off. This is the record button, and you have a small LED light here. Now this LED light is of two functionalities. A, it would actually tell you whether it's charging or not in red color, and then B, it'll tell you whether it's connected on Wi-Fi or Bluetooth on blue color. I really love this. And actually Panasonic, you have three shortcut buttons for the three most vital things that I normally play around with. That's your exposure, that's ISO, and that's your white balance. And you can always use this front dial to go ahead and actually change them. All you have to do is press one of these in the appropriate mode, and automatically they'll be highlighted, and using the front dial you can actually change their values. The grip is pretty solid. It's a very good grip, and I really appreciate Panasonic for maintaining this good grip. It's really handy both for photography as well as videos. I really like actually having it. So normally this is how I actually hold it. My pinky has a place to be in. My index finger is always on the shutter button. I can easily move from shutter button to the red recording button up here. My thumb is normally here in the second dial in the back. These both dials, the front one as well as the back one, both are actually programmable dials. So normally I would actually have my aperture values on the front dial. I'll have the shutter speed on the back dial and the ISO in the scrolling wheel on the back. But because you have an ISO button here, although you're having aperture configured for this, you can press the ISO button and always change values. Now this mark here says exactly where the lens is with respect to this body. Whenever you're calculating distance, it's going to come from this mark. This has a very beefy eyepiece here. I'm not sure why the eyepiece is this beefy. I guess Lumix engineers can actually explain why they have such a thick electronic live view up here. You actually have the diopter lens correction up down here. Obviously, there are no vents for heat dissipation, but because there's a very small sensor, the amount of heat it would generate is much more less when compared even to an APS-C sensor or a full frame sensor. I'm not that much worried about it of this getting heated up. Obviously, on the left hand side, you actually have your preview button. So after you take your photos and stuff, you can always press on that, go to the onboard gallery and try to have a preview on it. Then you have this LVF button. So you press this and the display would actually oscillate between the electronic viewfinder and the display itself. Now this is for selecting your type of focusing, and then this is a switch that will allow you to move across your focus methods: manual focus, continuous focus, and then single focus. I normally keep it in continuous focus because that's what I like. You do have an 8-way joystick up here to do different kind of selections, and also you can configure it as shortcut buttons. Obviously autofocus on off button, you have a Q shortcut button, you have the menu button, and then you have 4 buttons around this, which are again are customizable in terms of directional buttons. Then you have a display button, and then you have a delete button. That's a lot of buttons, man. And this is fully articulating screen, so it can actually come out in this way, flip 180 degrees, or keep it just at 90 degrees, and then even you can flip it and put it all the way back in. Now it does not partially flip up and stay in a particular angle like your GH6 or a GH7 would be, but I guess this is good enough. So on the left hand side, obviously no jingly danglies. So the first opening or the first door, either way you want to name it, on the left hand side when the camera is facing towards someone else, is the top one is the mic, and the bottom one is actually for monitoring. Yes, although this is a photocentric camera, it has a lot of video features that many other even video featured cameras might actually not be having. This has a 3.5mm jack, input for mic, always there for monitoring. The second door on the left side is for the HDMI as well as the USB-C port. This USB-C port can be used for charging the camera itself, or you can actually connect an external up to 2 TB SSD and record directly into it, making your workflow much more efficient rather than using SD cards. I just really love that. And full-fledged HDMI, it's much more convenient for people who actually rig it up to like external displays, or they're trying to rig the whole thing up as a full-fledged rigged up camera run and gun setup. I normally try to keep my setups as light as possible so that I can take them out and use as much. And even if I'm doing run and gun, I might most probably use this by handheld itself, because the G9 Mark II has excellent image stabilization right into it. I think it's 7.5 or 8 stops of image stabilization already there in the camera, between the 5-axis image stabilization and what you get in the lens and the electronic image stabilization that it actually gets into it. And if the setup is a bit heavier, then I have the DJI-RS3, the larger one. If it's lighter, I have the DJI-RS3 Mini. So I'm stacked for when it comes to gimbals, so I'm not much worried about it. But having an inbuilt stabilization up to 8 stops is really awesome. Please do comment below if you'd like to see a separate video on the image stabilization modes and their actually impact on the G9 Mark II. I'll be happy to do one. On this side, on the right hand side, as usual, you're going to have 2 SD card slots. You do have LED lighting trying to display whether it's getting recorded to that particular SD card or not. I've just put 2 of my 128 GB SD cards in. On the bottom side, you actually have this small covering which is there, and this is if you're going to go ahead and attach an extra battery pack below. So these are the pins for it. Just ensure whenever you remove these, you put them back in and flush so that your weather rating actually is intact. And then this is the battery bay. Now this battery bay is just having one battery. Now this battery, as usual, like your S52 or S52X, is the BLK22 battery. So you can go ahead and use your regular battery on your S52 or S52X if you own them. Then this becomes complementary to that because it uses the same body. If you're someone like me who owns a G9 Mark I or a GH6, then you got to go out and buy separate batteries actually for this. Now this is how it will actually look like with the 20 to 60 mm lens, and uh, G9 Mark II. So that's the unboxing and my first impressions of the G9 Mark II. Please do comment below your thoughts and comments about the G9 Mark II, or if you prefer GH7 over G9 Mark II, and if so, why? And if you'd ever consider a Micro Four Thirds as your first camera system, there is nothing wrong in it. They're pretty lightweight when you actually keep into consideration the body as well as the lens together. And then for a very decent price, you can actually build up a very solid lens kit and the body that might basically allow you to take wonderful photos and videos in almost most of the scenarios. One thing, remember, if you're actually looking at Micro Four Third, they are not a beast when it comes to low light. Not many of the crop sensors are. If you're purely looking for a low light camera, then you have to look for a full frame camera. How many times we actually shoot in low light? Until unless you are in a particular profession of like a wedding photography, or you're doing in areas where they're not properly lit, or you can't get any artificial light into it. I think most of the times you'll have decent amount of light for you to go ahead and use a Micro Four Third or a crop sensor, APS-C sensor camera. Until the next video, take care, stay safe, peace.